disorder. I gave you the schematic last week how they could be. So what can cause endocrine disorders, and we're not going over every one of these slides. So there could be congenital problems, and in the long run, congenital endocrine disorders usually manifest as a problem in a chain reaction where there's a missing enzyme. So you build up intermediary products because you can't ever get to the end product to turn off the machine. The negative feedback. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Infectious, obviously, any endocrine organ that gets infected, that can be disaster, right? Autoimmune, we're going to look at a couple autoimmune diseases like Graves and Addison's. Cancer, so syndrome, we covered it in Patho 1, I want you to know about it for next week's final. Syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone. So what is that? You are making ADH out of a cancer that's in your lung. So you are retaining too much water. You got ADH from the posterior pituitary being released and from the tumor. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. Idiopathic, that means, golly, we really don't know what the hell the cause of this is. Okay? Iatrogenic, that means that the healthcare provider screwed up. Well, it can mean that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that because there are so many things. When you give somebody chemo, if you don't give them chemo, you feel pretty good that they're not going to survive. But giving them the chemo has all kinds of downsides, right? One of the downsides of chemo and radiation therapy and other things is it harms the endocrine system. I already talked to you guys last week. I'm not going to go over it. Primary, secondary, tertiary. Remember, we're at the very end of class. So, growth hormone. What does it do? Now, all you need to know is the stuff I'm talking about. Okay? So, what does growth hormone do? I told you guys last week, it increases lean body mass and bone density, and it gets rid of fat. That's why a lot of people in the gym do growth hormone. Okay? Weird stuff, guys. Okay? So, listen. Don't look at this. Where's growth hormone made? Anterior pituitary. What commands it to be released? Hypothalamus, right? So, how can you get a problem with growth hormone? End organs aren't receptive to it for some reason. Watch, or something happens in the cranial vault. You don't have to memorize a list of specific things. If I say, child falls, hits their head, a child is not restrained in the car, there's a car accident, the car rolls over, kid hits his head, and at age 8, they're 3 percentile growth curve or less. What might be the problem? Well, growth hormone deficiency caused by what? I don't know, shit in the head. Okay? For real. I know, it's irreverent, right? Teachers aren't supposed to talk like that. Well, okay. If any one of you ever works in an operating room, it's worse than Comedy Central. Okay? For real. Listen, the way secondary and tertiary problems arise is by problems in the cranial vault. Now, there's a trillion that there can be. You don't need to memorize any of them. Does that make sense to you guys? If I say stroke, cranial vault. Edema, cerebral edema, cranial vault. Whatever, okay? So, prolonged labor, breech delivery, or, bottom line is, prolonged labor, breech delivery, what's the problem there? Contractions on the head, right? So, cranial vault issues. Humor, same thing. You don't need to know this slide. We're going to look at a couple of things from each category in a few seconds. The thing that's really weird is when, especially girls, young girls have growth hormone deficiency, they have such weirdly, precisely, finely defined features that it's almost spooky. And you know, right? Wow, look at the nose. The nose is so defined. There's no, I mean, you look in the mirror, I'm not being weird, you look in the mirror, all of our ears are asymmetric. Okay? Our eyes are asymmetric. Not gobs, but they're asymmetric. And maybe we're the only ones who don't notice. Okay? No such thing with kids that have growth hormone deficiency early on. Everything looks too perfect. Okay? So let's talk about percentiles. Let's talk about percentiles. My very beautiful, bright, ferocious, kick you in the ass if you piss her off, oldest daughter, is maybe 4 times. Okay? When she was born, she couldn't sustain a glucose level. She wasn't born preemie. She was small. She wasn't born preemie. My wife is shorter than I am, so we're not expecting big kids, right? And she pulled out the stupid IV twice on her first day on planet Earth. And so they had to splint her. And to make a long story short, she was hovering around 5.5, 6 percentile. Totally okay. As long as the kid doesn't drop off. Her pediatrician at the time said, hey, your kid's got failure, by 2 years of age, your kid's got failure to thrive. And we need to go and do an invasive echocardiogram. And I was like, what? And to make a long story short, they did pay for my daughter to do some other things in her life. That's horrible medicine, okay? Here's the thing. If the child's at 5, and we say below 3rd percentile, 5 is really a good point. It doesn't matter if they're low as long as they're tracking with that percentile. What matters is if they're falling off. Does that make sense to you guys? It's the same thing. My son's going to be, or my daughter's going to be WNBA. She's 98 percentile. Whoa, time out. 98th percentile? Holy crap, we better do some tests on her. We're not meant to be 98th percentile. That's not healthy, okay? So 95th or lower, and tracking. Does that make sense to you guys? So, classic case, child comes in, female comes in to wherever you're working, and you're like, hi, sweetheart, would you want, a sucker or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sticker? And she swears like a truck driver at you and says N15. And you're like, okay. No breast buds, hasn't menstruated at all, growth hormone problem. Make sense? Okay. I know that. I usually test them that. Okay? I don't care about this. So, what do when somebody's got a growth hormone deficiency? Well, you give them growth hormone, okay? How often? 3 to 7 times a week. It's much more effective in kids than it is in adults. And I'm not talking about the gym rat crowd that puts growth hormone to counteract other hormones that we're putting in the body, okay? So 3 to 7 injections a week. And after about a year, those injections aren't really worth their money. So you got about some people take them for longer. You got about a year. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Now, here's the deal. You also need the thyroid to be functioning perfectly well, because you can give all the growth hormone in the world. If the thyroid isn't doing its job, the thyroid gland, then the growth hormone doesn't have its synergist working. Make sense? Okay. What's the presentation of growth hormone deficiency in an adult? Well, they tend to have hypercholesterolemia, and they look like they developed baby fat again, okay? And they may have, over time, if it's not replaced, they will definitely develop all kinds of problems with their bones, because the bone density starts going to hell. Don't care about that. So, if you have too much growth hormone in childhood, or too much, yes, too much in childhood, that's when you get gigantism. Okay? If a child is above the 95th percentile, it doesn't matter if they look, like some of the other kids, if they're above the 95th percentile, no way. Alabama, Nick Saban, over the summertime, has a family that committed their 12 or 13-year-old to play, to go to Alabama, okay? And this 12 or 13-year-old can dunk a basketball on a 10-foot rim. This 12 or 13-year-old, in summer, beginning of summer, I think it was 350 pounds and 6.5 feet tall. So the kid's been commoditized, okay? Because what does Alabama do? They always get the biggest possible defenders. Yeah.
So the percentile is based off of height and weight, or just how they grow, or?
Percentile, yeah, I mean, it's height and weight, it's definitely height and weight. But the norms that are determined, where do norms come from? These are norms that have a whole lot of data behind them. But yeah, height and weight, for sure. So that kid, I understand, you come from a poor household, right? Oh my God, my kid's gonna go to Alabama. Odds are pretty good that when that kid, if there's no medical intervention to make him not be so appealing to Alabama, by the time the kid's 30, he's probably gonna have heart attacks. Just because the body grew too rapidly and too big for the heart that's genetically encoded, okay? What about if you have too much growth hormone, but you develop that as an adult? That's Abraham Lincoln, okay? Seriously, just think Abe Lincoln. He was 6'3", that wasn't that big of a deal. He's tall, and compared to his wife, that was ridiculously tall. But he wasn't that tall, relatively speaking. He just had big forehead, protruding jaw, longer arms, and big bony hands and feet. That's acromegaly. Make sense? So what do you do if you have growth hormone? Listen, if it's a tumor, where would the tumor be? Yeah, it's either going to be anterior pituitary or hypothalamus or right in that region, and lots of disaster happens when you go in to operate in that area, okay? Even when you go through the supraorbital fissure, which is basically what you have to do. So what do? You try giving antagonist hormones, okay, which have their own downside. So we talked a whole lot about the thyroid and thyroid hormones last week. Remember, T3 is the active form, and T form is the inactive form. Yes?
So these people that are taking them to buy it to do whatever they do, if they take too much, what happens to them? I mean, they're not going to grow, or will they?
No.
Okay.
No, that's a really good question. When you take growth hormone as an adult, like the gym rats do, and I love gym rats. I do not mean that negatively. I love working out and running and stuff, so I'm not saying they're bad, but putting stuff in your body is bad. So, what are they taking for? I mean, the days of growing taller are over. They're actually taking it to get rid of fat and develop much more, actually increase weight, lean muscle mass. That's why they're taking it. And so what happens to them? Well, they fall prey because all that stuff changes the body's homeostatic mechanisms, right, Alicia? And it sets people up for cancer and strokes and cardiovascular disease, and they all swear no because they have. A friend emailed me something, neither he nor I are conspiracy theorists. There's so much really cool shit to do that following tracing conspiracy theories is a waste of time in my opinion. And eventually, if there really is a conspiracy going on, you can't bribe enough people to keep their mouth shut. Somebody's going to talk, okay? But this one particular thing he sent me was, this is the truth. This was an ad in some on some website. You know, $5 to get you this booklet to show the truth that few people know about increasing, your strength. So wait, you're advertising on the web that anybody can read, right? And it's the secret that only a few know. Yeah, okay. Save your money, okay? So they're screwing your bodies big time. And you'll see them, depending upon where you work, as a nurse, you'll see them, internal medicine docs. A nice little string we have, because we have such beautiful weather here, in my opinion, because we have such beautiful weather here and so many outdoor things that people can do, you guys will absolutely see people in clinics who have all sorts of strange maladies that are because they're playing pharmacists with their body. So hypothyroidism, okay? The majority of them are primary. What does that mean? The problem's in the thyroid gland, okay? If there is a congenital hypothyroidism, that child, in all likelihood, won't make it to adulthood. And for the little or long, however long they're on planet Earth, they are profoundly compromised mentally, behaviorally, physically, in every way. Why? Because it doesn't matter how much flipping growth hormone you have if you don't have enough thyroid hormone. They have to work together to bring about growth, right? What's one of the things that grows super rapidly when we're first born until about 12, 13 years of age? Neurons. So if the patient has congenital hypothyroidism, the word cretinism, it sucks, but it's a proper term, and it means it has a particular IQ meaning to it, okay? So, there's a bunch of different kinds of hypothyroidism. Most of them are primary, which means it arises in the thyroid gland itself. We have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disease, and we have Graves', which we'll talk about. But remember I said last week, Hashimoto's causes hypothyroidism in the short run that can lead to thyroid storm and crazy hyperthyroidism in the long run. Remember that from last week? Okay. Who else gets hypothyroidism? Well, obviously, if somebody's had a tumor that's been irradiated, or they had to have part or all of the thyroid gland resected, they're going to have hypothyroidism unless they have some medicine that's put in their body. What about people that have iodine deficiency? I talked about that last week. No need to repeat that, other than to say, if you use salt after reading the article that I sent to you guys about blood pressure, shame on you, okay? All right, everybody's giving me dagger looks. Shame on you, okay? Seriously, unless you have an iodine problem, unless you have a thyroid issue, I'm not talking to you. But if you don't have a thyroid issue, you use salt, it should be iodized, okay? So, this. So remember, hypothalamus, anterior pit, thyroid. So we release T3 and T4. T4 is inactive, that's the majority. T3 is the active, that's the minority form that's released. Okay, it's a negative feedback mechanism. If you are hypothyroid, what's going on? You're not releasing, for whatever reason, enough T3 or T4 or both. So what happens? You can't turn off the mechanism. The hypothalamus and the anterior pituitary don't know, other than, hey, the particular molecule that we're sensitive to isn't in the blood, So keep on making, keep on making, keep on making. As that command goes down to the thyroid, what do? The thyroid gland becomes hyperplastic. It becomes big. And what's that a goiter? Make sense, everybody? Okay. Secondary hypothyroidism. Oh my gosh, where's that? In the head, right? Pituitary, anterior pituitary problem. What can cause anterior pituitary problems? All kinds of things. Don't remember lists. Okay? List memorization is meaningless. So, what are the clinical manifestations of hypothyroidism in infants? They have, it's weird. It's this big tongue that just sticks out and doesn't do anything. Okay? And when they have very, very little muscle tone. Often they have jaundice. And they actually, when they're crying, they sound like their instructor does too. Okay? Super hoarse. And what happens, well, it depends on what the cause is and how much damage has already happened. Okay. I talked about what happens in adults, and so it used to be for very many years in this country, someone would show up at their PCP, and you get weighed, and hey, you're 10 pounds heavier than you were the last time you came in. What's going on? It's my thyroid. I mean, euphemism, as a nation, we accepted that for about 30 years. Okay? Well, hypothyroidism is actually pretty serious, even if you have a mild case of it, long term. So, you guys can look, I talk about that, cold intolerance, etc. The bottom line is, if you don't address the hypothyroidism, listen to me, okay? There are lots, especially in this state, especially in the American Southwest, especially in Cali. Because, we know more. We get in touch with spiritual energies, and we go natural, and we smoke weed and stuff, and, whatever. And I'm not dissing any of that, necessarily. From a health perspective, we know this stuff's terrible, right? You're going to come in contact with people who've been diagnosed as having hypothyroidism. No, dude, I'm not taking any meds. No way. I don't believe in putting that crap in my body. What you want to do is you want to take a 2x4 and hit them over the head, okay? If they're open to reasoning, you sit down and you talk to them, you're like, okay, so if you, God forbid, have a heart attack, don't want us to do anything, we'll just I don't know, burn some herbs or something. And it's not attacking medicine women, I'm not attacking them. I'm saying, you don't want anything in your body, really? If you have congestive heart failure, you don't want diuresis? You have chest pain, you don't want Chris and his gang to make it over to your house? Come on, it's bullshit, okay? So, what happens if you don't take medicine? Dude, I don't like the medicine because it's uneven. I have up days, I have down days, and it's not like insulin when you can adjust, the patient can adjust on their own. You can't adjust your thyroid medicine on your own, okay? Even though people do it every day. So if you don't take medicine, eventually you develop mixed edema. And what's that? Edema, you know what that is. Mix is because of the glycosaminoglycans, they build up. And they exert what? An oncotic pressure. Fluid comes out of the surrounding vessels and starts to fill those tissues. Like where? Oh, I don't know. Like in the brain. Okay? Wait a second. You're saying that prolonged, untreated hypothyroidism, even if it's mild, but you have it for a long period of time, yeah, you're building up cerebral edema. And what's the downside of that? Come up. Okay? So, I'm not doing Synthroid. I believe in being, bless you, I believe in being natural. Really? I don't see anybody here in this class wearing anything that's completely natural. So where do you draw the line on the bullshit between natural and not natural? Okay? Your car, it's all synthetic. So don't drive. Why? Be natural. Okay? I mean, seriously, we gotta cut the crap, all right? My last lecture with you guys, I'd say whatever the hell I want to say. Okay? What am I saying? Because you're gonna see people, I'm getting it natural, shipped from Canada. No, unless, I'm not saying the FDA is the greatest organization in the world, they're not. But at least something that's approved by the FDA. There are inspectors, and when it comes to meds, you can count on, if it says 20 milligrams of X, it has 20 milligrams of X. When you buy the quote natural, close quote, synthroid replacements, one tablet to the next, there may be no consistency. So one makes you more hypothyroid, the other precipitates a temporary thyrotoxic storm. Sounds like a great way to navigate your life. Okay? Oh, and no one inspects that shit. So how is it purified? Jim, you seem really cynical. I've seen people die from taking that stuff. If that's cynical, then yes, I'm cynical. Okay? Golly, Jim. So, listen, if we have a primary hypothyroidism, primary means what? It's in the thyroid gland, right? So what does that mean? We're going to see elevated TSH. Okay, yeah.
So why do you see it common with women after they have their child?
Say it again.
After childbirth, a lot of women will end up hypothyroid. I mean, I did after I had my son. Why does it coordinate with childbirth?
So, that's a brilliant question. Everything goes through the hypothalamus, right? It's the master gland. It sounds like Grandmaster Flash, but anyway, it's the master gland. When a woman's pregnant, all the homeostatic mechanisms change. And it still goes through the hypothalamus, but what happens is, the hypothalamus in a healthy pregnancy, you have to increase your thyroid hormone production, right? Obviously. Mm-hmm. But the hypothalamus keeps tabs on that. So when the child comes out, Bernice would be great if, hey, okay, child came out, I can just turn off all the excess right now, like the spigot, on a well or something. But the body doesn't do that. The body usually pendulums back and forth until it finds the balance. And that's an example of that in a healthy woman, okay? Does it make sense to you? Mm-hmm. So it overcompensates, oh my God, kid came out, slow down on the thyroid, they become hypothyroid. I'm not saying that's what your OB-GYN told you, but there are other reasons, but that's the mainstream reason. So, if we have a primary hypothyroidism problem, we see elevated TSH. So if I ask you on a test, next week on the final, patient has elevated TSH, what are you thinking? Well, they probably have a primary thyroid problem. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? Here's the deal. Why is point number 2 valid? Because even though it's a lipid hormone, the thyroid gland is the one gland that makes a lipid hormone that stores it. Remember, all other lipid hormones are made when they're needed. And so you might do a thyroid panel and not see diminished T3, T4 levels for a little while. Make sense? Okay. So what happens if the problem is up in the cranial vault? If the problem's up in the cranial vault, what are you going to see? You're going to see right away low levels of TSH and low levels of T4. Does that make sense to you guys? Now listen, this is oversimplifying it. The thyroid panel is much more complicated. But for test questions, that's what we're going with. So how do you treat it? I already talked about it. Hyperthyroidism. There are a bunch of things that can cause hyperthyroidism. Look at the last bullet point. Ingestion of excessive thyroid hormone. When does that happen? Two instances that I want you guys to know about. The gym rat crowd. They got a hold of some of that Canadian stuff. Okay? They mailed in, hey, everything's cheaper, it's from Canada. They're, Trudeau's young, he's good looking, and they're socialist. Must be good for my body. Okay? And they put it in their body because they want to get rid of the excess fat and build lean muscle. And all of a sudden they come into the emergency room and their heart's beating at 190 minutes. Okay? That's one instance. The other instance is when people play pharmacist, they know that they have a thyroid problem. Guys, listen, when you're on thyroid medicine, I want to say it again, it's not like when you take insulin. Hey, think, if I'm an insulin-dependent diabetic, I'm going to go to Cold Stone Creamery to celebrate after taking the final next week. I'm going to go to Two Fools Pub and drink after, get some good Macallan scotch. Did I just say that? Okay. So I'm going to take 2 units of insulin. Right, you can do that. The thyroid medicine, you cannot do that. It's your healthcare provider that you need to talk to who will determine when and how you alter the medicine. So if you're a nurse and you're talking to some patient, I don't know, man. I don't know. You're in there, right? You're taking vitals or whatever. Doctor hasn't come in, and the doctor yelled at you yesterday, and you think they suck, and you don't know what they're talking about. And the patient, you get chummy with the patient. A lot of nurses think that's cool. That's unethical. Okay? Build a camaraderie, yes, be nice, but you're a healthcare professional. You're not the bud. Okay? It will burn you if you become the bud. So, you're talking, and the patient says, I think that the dose that he or she's got me on is not enough. What do you think? Should I take a little bit more? I can't tell you how many times in clinics in this flipping town, nurses have said, yeah, try it for a few days or whatever, see. Thyroid storm. Okay? That's the other condition. Now, there's this autoimmune disease called Graves' disease. I talked about Hashimoto's last week. Hashimoto's causes hypo and hyper. Hashimoto's destroys the thyroid gland itself. Okay? Graves' disease destroys the receptors for TSH. Exclusively. Does that make sense to you guys? Big difference. So Graves' disease, by definition, the immunoglobulins bond to the receptors on the thyroid, and in that act of bonding, as they're destroying the receptor, they're triggering release T3, T4, release T3, T4, release T3, T4. Does that make sense to you guys? Whereas with Hashimoto's, you're just destroying tissue, so you might block the receptors, and there's no firing, hypothyroidism, but then you tore into a follicle, and out comes stored T4, and then you've got thyroid storm. That's Hashimoto's. Yep.
So, I was diagnosed with both Graves' and Hashimoto's with my celiac disease and just the whole mess. Is that possible?
I don't want to answer that question, Heather.
Okay.
How long ago was that diagnosis?
See, it was 2005.
That sounds like a hedge on a Jim Ferrato's test. You've got Graves and you've got Hashimoto's. There might be reported in the literature. I'm not aware of it. Okay? That doesn't mean that that's a wrong diagnosis. I'm just your lowly patho teacher. Okay?
Can you have the autoantibodies for both?
Yeah. Hell yeah. Exactly. Marty Feldman, Graves' disease. Okay? All right, talk about this. What other kinds of things? So, Autoimmune we talked about. What if it's a primary thing? If it's a primary thing, who knows what the cause of it could be? There aren't that many primary things that bring about hyperthyroidism. But there could be like cancer, right? That could do it. Some sort of infection or whatever. But it's usually up above or autoimmune. If it's up above, you don't worry about it. It's whatever the hell happens in the cranial vault. Make sense? So, the reason why your question is interesting, Heather, Graves, I mean, it's interesting because it's interesting, but I'm saying it's like, okay, so, but they're both Hashimoto's and Graves are both autoimmune. What does Graves do? It attaches to the TSH receptors, but it stimulates the production and the release of T3, T4, okay? So, that's Graves. Hashimoto's just destroys and does not stimulate the release.
Because he had me do the iodine ablation, and he said, we'll treat the Graves because then resolve the same treatment for the Hashimoto. So I was just like,
Okay,
I didn't know anything, but.
now listen, you're doing fine, God bless, okay? Why you don't fix something if it ain't broke? I'm serious, guys, okay? So who tends to get, Graves and the autoimmune varieties of hyperthyroidism? Females in the 20s and 30s, okay? Make sense? That's important, because if it's a guy in his 50s, probably not Graves, okay? Marty Feldman had Graves from very young. So I talked about hyperthyroidism presentation last week. You obviously are juice in your body, and it's like dropping a bunch of meth or amphetamines in your body, okay? Don't care about that. Thyroid storm. I've mentioned a bunch of times that can happen in a bunch of contexts, but when is it actually really? It's when there's a hyperthyroid state, regardless of the reason for that hyperthyroid state. So, what does the thyroid do? It increases BMR, right? And if you are, it's like fight or flight. It's like a sympathetic system, nervous system trigger. So, people can spike temperatures. One of the first people that I was responsible for their care in medical intensive care unit had a hyperthyroid storm and hit 110 for a fever. Okay? And it lasted for like 2 hours. It took everything we could do to bring that temperature down. And it fried his brain. Okay? You get tachycardia, blood pressure jacks up. So what do? You give some patholytic drugs to downturn anything that's remotely juice in the person's body, and then you have to figure out what the hell's causing the hyperthyroidism. Here's the bad news with Hashimoto's. So, Heather, close your ears. Here's the bad news with Hashimoto's. You never have any security that's managed. Okay? Unless you take huge doses of immune modulating medicines. And if you do take huge doses of immunomodulating medicines, those have other downside effects on the body. Okay? The other thing that's implicit from an instructor's perspective in what Heather asked, it's weird, guys, but when a person has one autoimmune disease, it's not unusual for them to ultimately develop a second. Okay? So, what else for that? Okay, we're done with this chapter. Jim, we're done. One thing before I start the last chapter on diabetes, and I'm going to jump around this one. one last thing I wanna say to you is this. Parathyroid glands on the back of the thyroid gland, there's 4 of them, right? And they